Have you ever pictured a Viking, fresh from battle, raising a skull to his lips and taking a triumphant gulp? It's a powerful, gruesome image, featured in everything from movies to video games. But did it actually happen? Did Vikings really drink from the skulls of their enemies? The short answer is probably not. It's a fantastic story, but it's one of the most persistent and epic myths about the Viking Age. So, if it's not true, where did this bloody idea even come from? Today, we're going to debunk this myth, trace its fascinating origins, and explore what Vikings actually drank from. The whole Skull Cup story seems to originate from a single, massive misunderstanding. It starts with a piece of Old Norse poetry, the Kurkumul, or the Lay of Kraka. In this poem, the legendary hero Ragnar Lodbrok is dying in a snake pit and boasts about the glorious afterlife awaiting him in Valhalla. He looks forward to drinking ale from the curved branches of skulls. Sounds pretty clear, right? Branches of skulls must mean skull cups. Well, not exactly. This is a classic example of a kinning, a type of metaphorical phrase common in Norse poetry. Vikings loved poetic riddles. Instead of saying sword, they might say wound wand. Instead of battle, they might say storm of shields. So what are the curved branches of skulls? Think about it. What grows out of an animal's skull in curved branches? Horns. The poet was talking about drinking from horns, which were incredibly common drinking vessels in the Viking Age. This simple poetic phrase was misinterpreted hundreds of years later. In the 17th century, a Danish scholar named Ole Worm was translating the Kurkumul into Latin. He took the kinning literally. He translated curved branches of skulls as drinking ex cranius erum quos sussiderant from the skulls of those they had slain. And just like that, a myth was born. This sensational, gory image was far too cool to fact-check, and it spread like wildfire across Europe, painting the Vikings as the ultimate barbarians. So, if not skulls, what were their cups of choice? As the poem suggested, drinking horns were extremely popular. They were practical, durable, and looked impressive. Archaeological digs have uncovered many of these, some plain and simple, others decorated with elaborate metal fittings. They were a status symbol. The bigger and more ornate your horn, the more important you were. Imagine a chieftain at a feast, raising a massive, silver-tipped drinking horn. That was the real power move. Besides horns, Vikings used a variety of other drinking vessels. For everyday use, they had simple wooden cups, bowls, and tankards. Wood was cheap, abundant, and easy to carve. We've found many examples of these in Viking settlements. They were the equivalent of our everyday glasses. For the wealthier Vikings, there were more luxurious options. They imported beautiful glassware from the Rhineland in modern-day Germany. These glass beakers, known as cone beakers, were fragile and expensive, a true sign of wealth and connections. They also used imported pottery and even cups made from precious metals like silver, often acquired through trade or raiding. The image of a Viking drinking from a delicate glass beaker is a lot different from the brutish skull drinker, isn't it? So what did they fill these cups with? The most common drink was ale. It was a staple of the Viking diet for everyone, including children, as it was often safer to drink than water. They also brewed mead, a sweet, fermented honey wine, which was more of a special occasion drink, often associated with feasts, rituals, and poetry. Wine was also available, but it was a luxury import from places like France and was reserved for the very rich. The act of drinking itself was a huge part of Norse culture. Feasts were central to social and political life. Leaders would host grand feasts to reward their followers, forge alliances, and celebrate victories. These gatherings involved a lot of toasting, storytelling, and poetic contests. The Sumbel, a formal toasting ritual, was a key part of these events. Participants would pass around a horn of ale or mead, making oaths, boasts, or honoring gods and ancestors. It was a way to bond the community, reaffirm loyalties, and make binding promises in front of witnesses. In these halls, your words were as important as your weapon. So, the idea of Vikings drinking from skulls is a fantastic piece of folklore, born from a poetic misunderstanding and amplified over centuries. It helped create the fearsome, bloodthirsty image of the Viking we know today. But the reality is more complex and, in many ways, more interesting. The real Vikings were a people who appreciated fine craftsmanship, engaged in complex social rituals, and valued poetry just as much as a good raid. Their drinking culture was about community, status, and celebration, not just barbaric triumphalism. Next time you see a Viking on screen chugging from a skull, you can smile and know the real story. They were far more likely to be sipping from an elegant drinking horn or a fragile glass beaker, composing a poem and making a toast to the gods. Thanks for joining me on this dive into Viking history. If you enjoyed debunking this myth with me, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like to see busted. Until next time, stay curious.